a lot to be done, especially in our law enforcement agencies, the police and the judiciary. Nigerians need to be respected.
President Buhari promises to strengthen critical institutions of government.
Ahead of state polls, INEC chairman meets with resident electoral commissioners.
Chief Judge of the FCT High Court, Justice Ishak Bello, inaugurates FCT Election Petition Tribunal.
And on Good Morning Nigeria today, we focus on lessons from the presidential and National Assembly elections.
The long-awaited presidential and National Assembly rescheduled elections have come and gone. 73 candidates contested for the highest office in the country, and only one winner emerged, and that is President Muhammadu Buhari.
That's right, Kirian. Now, for the National Assembly elections, 1,904 candidates, including 67 senators, contested for the 109 seats in the upper legislative chamber, the Senate.
Also, Kingsley, 4,680 candidates contested for 366 of the House of Representatives. Among them are 259 serving members.
Now, INEC, the electoral umpire, has already issued the incumbent President Muhammadu Buhari and Vice President Yemi Osinbajo with their certificates of return as elected candidates.
That's right, Kingsley. Although the closest contender to the president, the candidate of the People's Democratic Party, Atiku Abubakar, and his party have rejected the results due to some issues raised.
Well, the 2019 general elections so far, especially for the National Assembly, have come with some huge surprises, as some political bigwigs could not secure their seats in the legislature, while the victors are celebrating, the losers obviously are counting their losses.
And so, with the emergence of winners of the presidential and National Assembly elections, how was the conduct of the elections? And what lessons have been learnt from the electoral process? These are some of the issues that will engage our guests today as we do a post-mortem on the presidential and the National Assembly elections. Welcome to Good Morning Nigeria, broadcast live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. And of course, we're reaching you from the capital city of Nigeria, and that's Abuja. My name is Kirian Umayo.
And I'm Kingsley Osadolo. I join my colleague here and also welcoming you to the program, at the course of which we shall bring you our complimentary segments. And these are newspaper review, business, sports, foreign, and entertainment. All right, now let's begin with the morning news highlights. And here is Musbah Udan Wahab as our anchor for that segment. Morning, Musbah.
Good morning, Kingsley and Kirian. It's a wet morning in the Federal Capital Territory. Here's the news. President Muhammadu Buhari has promised to do everything within his power towards strengthening critical institutions of government as a deliberate attempt to put Nigeria on a solid base for sustainable future. The president was speaking while playing host to hosting to a victory dinner the young volunteers who manned the Situation Room of the APC presidential campaign headquarters.
I assure you that I will maintain focus, because I had been deliberate in my decision to get involved in partisan politics. There's a lot to be done, especially in our law enforcement agencies, the police and the judiciary. Nigerians need to be respected. And I hope I will make impact by the next 4 years to make sure that the institutions are strengthened democratically so that Nigerians can live and be happy in their own country. My aim is to put this country on a solid political base.
Some of the issues experienced in last Saturday's election may not be repeated in the state elections, as those in charge of election administration meet to review areas of lapses. INEC Chairman Professor Mahmoud Yakubu convened the meeting with resident electoral commissioners in Abuja.
Once you conduct the national elections, you take stock and review so that processes and procedures are strengthened, learning from the experience of previous elections before we go into the state elections.
The All Progressives Congress, APC, has commended Nigerians for re-electing President Muhammadu Buhari. The party's national chairman, Adams Oshiomhole, at a press conference in Abuja, described the planned court action by the PDP presidential candidate, Atiku Abubakar, as an action that negates the peace accord signed by all presidential candidates before the election.
The essence of the collective effort that have been made and the intervention of all those I can describe as genuine friends of Nigeria has been to try to improve the electoral process so that rigging can be eliminated or at least reduced to tolerable level.
Protect Nigeria Group, a set of concerned Nigerians, has called for the resignation of the national chairman of the People's Democratic Party, PDP, Uche Secondus. In a statement, the national secretary of the group, Abdul Wahab, described the PDP's rejection of presidential election results announced by INEC as a recipe for disaster. He stressed that to doubt the general credibility of a 2019 election is to disregard the rules of election, which include tendering grievances before the courts. The group advised the PDP chairman to withdraw his statement, apologize to Nigerians, and resign his position. The group is also urging Nigerians to maintain peace and unity this period and beyond. The Kungiao Datawan Arewa Initiative, a pan-regional association in the north, as described as heartwarming more domestic and global endorsement of President Muhammadu Buhari's recent victory at the polls. The association, rising from a meeting in Abuja, was quick to note that the elections are judged to be generally free, fair and peaceful was no doubt a significant milestone in Nigeria's democratic journey that began in 1999. A press statement jointly signed by Major General Paul Tarfa, retired, and one-time Nigeria's Minister of Agriculture, Sani Zango Daura, notes with satisfaction the spread observed in the conduct of the exercise that cut across all divides, further demonstrating the acceptability of a president's style of leadership, while congratulating the closest opposition party for the fighting spirit displayed. The association calls on all stakeholders in the Nigeria project to accept in good faith the outcome of the elections in the overall interest of the country. The association also enjoins President Muhammadu Buhari to remain focused and resolute in his determination to uplift the nation to the next level of achievement. Information and Culture Minister Lai Mohammed says building a strong, secure, economically buoyant and corrupt-free society is the responsibility of all citizens. The minister stated this at a meeting with staff of the ministry in Abuja.
Well, thanking you for your support in this past 3 years plus. I want to implore you to continue to support this administration. The effort put in by each and every one of us goes a long way in making the country a better place.
The Chief Judge of the Federal Capital Territory High Court, Justice Ishaq Bello, has implored judicial officers to exhibit diligence, dedication and honesty in discharging their duties in order to win public confidence and trust for the judiciary. He stated this while inaugurating the FCT Election Petition Tribunal.
They should be very much upright and show courage. They don't have to look over their shoulders before saying this is the position.
We are going to abide by our oath of allegiance and judicial oath that we have sworn to do.
That's the news for this morning. Subsequently in our news bulletins. Good morning, Nigeria. We'll continue shortly with Kingsley and Kirian after this break.
Mars Medical Mission MMM is offering free services on a wide range of medical issues. Take advantage of these offers, especially by availing yourself of the National Cancer Prevention Program NCPP. You can do so by coming for our Wellness Wednesday program at 31 Bode Thomas Street, Surulere, Lagos every Wednesday from 7 a.m. You also have the opportunity of seeing the specialist and getting expert opinion on any health issues that may have been bothering you. Are you preparing to get married to your sweetheart? Then we have a pre-marital health program that will help you ensure that you start your married life on a healthy footing. Very important health screening and counseling will be made available for you and your partner. You can avail yourself of this opportunity by attending our pre-wedding Wednesday program from 7 a.m. For inquiries, send a mail to info@pinkcruise.org or log on to www.pinkcruise.org or call 0805-633-4288. Mission Pink Cruise, taking wellness to all.
All right, Nigeria ranks top among countries applying the principles of Extractive Industries Transparency Initiative in the mining sector. Let's join our correspondent for details of these stories and others.
The Executive Secretary, Nigeria Extractive Industry Transparency Initiative, Mr. Waziri Adio, while reacting to the rating, noted that the implication of the satisfactory progress will be felt on all the value chain within the extractive sector, as it will boost investor confidence given the level of transparency and anti-corruption drive of the present administration. This year makes it the 15th year Nigeria started implementation of the EITI principles of transparency in the extractive industry sector.
Nigerians now know more about the sector than before. You can also see that most of the changes being implemented over time, but especially under this administration, there are also recommendations coming from the report.
Meanwhile, following the re-election of President Muhammadu Buhari into office for another 4-year term, some respondents say the expectation is to see the Buhari administration focus more on its economic recovery drive, especially with the social investment programs.
Other programs like traders money, the agri program, these are well thought programs that I think if followed up carefully well, it will go a long way to change the present circumstances we are in.
My expectation from this new Baba Buhari's government, that in the next 4 years, is I want Baba to focus more on the areas of our economic program.
And let's see how Thursday's tradings went on the floor of the Nigerian Stock Exchange. With business news, I'm Kunle Adeyeye.
Thank you indeed, Kunle, for that business package. Next on Good Morning Nigeria is newspaper review.
All right, our newspaper reviewer, Baya Toebe, is right here with us on the studios. Baya, good morning. It's a wet day in the Federal Capital Territory.
Good morning, Kingsley. It's the kind of day that you feel so reluctant to get out of bed, but you must. Good morning, Kirian.
Baya, you're welcome. We have about 5 newspapers to review this morning.
Yes.
And
6, I believe.
Yes, with the editorial. Okay. Kingsley, you may have to begin.
Okay, let's take the Daily Trust newspaper. Daily Trust newspaper, just below the nameplate of the paper, says Abdul Salami and Kuka meet Atiku and Obi over polls outcome. That's on page 6. Abdul Salami, that's former head of state, and Bishop Kuka meeting Atiku and Obi over polls outcome. That's on page 6. And Nigeria loses over 1.81 trillion naira to contract disputes. Details can be found on page 17. Lead story, of course, is on the outcome of the National Assembly elections. 64 senators, 151 reps failed to return to National Assembly. 64 senators, 151 reps failed to return to National Assembly as APC forms majority in Senate and House. You have the illustration there. By way of infographics, it says the making of the 9th National Assembly. You can see APC 64 members, that's 59%, PDP 41, that's 37%, YPP, that's 1%. And 3 senatorial elections are still pending, and those ones include the following: 1 in Plateau, 1 in Kogi, and 1 in Imo. 15 former governors among senators elect. And for the House of Reps, you have the infographics there. In 2019, they're saying House of Reps members not returning 151. And in 2015, there were 229. So you also have other illustrations on the front page there. And just below that, right at the foot of the front page of the Daily Trust newspaper, Onoge, Supreme Court fixes judgment for May 17th. And INEC set for governorship elections in 29 states. Arms deal, court jails AVM Omenyi for 7 years. Page 3. Kirian.
All right, we now turn to the Nigerian Tribune. Nigerian Tribune, below the nameplate. Atiku Obi Saraki meet with Abdul Salami Peace Committee on page 8. And then Armsgate, court sentences AVM Omenyi to 21 years imprisonment. Is on page 34. And now a 50-year-old man arrested for allegedly planning to kill niece after impregnating her. And now the main headline of the Nigerian Tribune: how APC plots to win South-South on seats our governors, says PDP. You can get that story on pages 6, 8, 10, and 36. But there has some riders to it. Tambuwal calls for U.S. intervention in Goba election. PDP wins Plateau North, 4 reps. APC wins Plateau South, 3 reps. Police stop anti-Tinubu Otoge rally in Lagos. Now, court sacks Lulu Briggs as a court Goba candidate in Rivers State. Now, there are other political stories there. Just besides the photograph on the Nigerian Tribune on the left-hand side, Oyo Guba, Ladoja, Alawa Kala, Makinde, Lale Hinali, meet to reconvene today for final decision. That's on page 36. And now below that, Atiku's recourse to tribunal threat to peace accord, says APC chairman Oshombala, is on page 8. And he says APC will cross appeal PDP's petition. We have to bring in Bayo Tebi here for further analysis.
Thank you, Kirian. The Independent National Electoral Commission met yesterday. The chairman and all resident electoral commissioners met to review the presidential election that was held last Saturday, and also to plan for the governorship, state houses of assembly, and the FCT area council for March 9th. The state governorship elections will hold in 29 states of the Federation and the Federal Capital Territory. There's no gubernatorial candidate for the Federal Capital Territory, but the area council's election. The meeting is being held behind closed doors. Meanwhile, the National Peace Committee, led by former head of state Abdul Salami Abubakar, has met with the People Democratic Party presidential candidate. General Abubakar Abdul Salami said the mission was to douse rising tension in the aftermath of the elections. Other People's Democratic Party leaders that were at the meeting include Mr. Peter Obi, the PDP chairman, Prince Uche Secondos, the Senate President, and the Speaker of the House of Representatives. Alhaji Atiku Abubakar said, in the 3 decades that he's been in Nigeria's struggle for democracy, this is the worst election in 30 years. Not even the military conducted such a bad election. This is a long journey but he is confident of victory. Meanwhile, the Vanguard reports that the People's Democratic Party presidential candidate has made a 6-point demand from the federal government. The first one is the unfreezing of the bank accounts of all opponent politicians. The second one, demilitarization of subsequent polls. Third one, the accreditation of voters should take place before voting in subsequent elections. In other words, it should not be simultaneously as was done. Fourthly, there should be no deployment of the military in subsequent elections. Fifthly, INEC should open its back-end server to all participating political parties. And sixthly, there should be a release of all politicians detained illegally. The Vanguard says the demands were presented to the National Peace Committee headed by General Salami Abubakar. The Peace Committee is expected to meet with President Muhammadu Buhari with the demands.
All right, Bayo, let's take a look at the front page of the Punch newspaper. Punch newspaper from above the nameplate, illegal mining highest in Niger and 5 other states. That's according to NAITI, and details of that story can be found on page 25. Illegal mining highest in Niger and 5 other states, according to NAITI, page 25. Police tear gas anti-Tinubu protesters in Lagos, that's page 5. And many callers complained about hoodlums at polling units, that's according to an election monitor. Falana sues Bajabia Miller for unpaid 20 million naira professional fee. Details can be found inside. There are 2 earpieces beside the nameplate. Senatorial seats. APC wins Jonathan's district and 64 others. That's on page 15. And governorship poll, ABGA wants Zamfara REC removed to avert violence. That's on page 7. Next story, of course, is part of what you have already discussed. It's in the other papers. Presidential poll results. Abu Salami and Kuka meet Atiku, and Obi Asoshomole attacks ex-vice president. Details on pages 2 and 10. Now, you can see the photographs there on the front page of the Punch newspaper. The caption is crowd at Adeyemi Bero Auditorium in Alausa, Ikeja during the All Progressives Congress distribution of free rice to the people of Lagos on Thursday. There are one of those photographs there, the one at the lower right side. You can see that maybe a few punches that were thrown there yesterday, maybe a few of the bags also probably ripped open so that they could share the rice. Now, right at the foot of the front page of the Punch newspaper, be humble in victory, presidency tells APC members. That's page 23. And fuel spillage from vandalized NPC pipeline causes panic in Lagos. Ondo, 15 persons die of Lassa fever, 102 infected in 2 months. Page 10.
All right, that's a very serious health matter there.
Lassa has been virtually on the rampage, this year.
It's on the increase, and apparently because of the political campaign atmosphere and election, it seems to people seem not to have taken note of it. But the National Health Department has actually said that it is not as wide as being exaggerated. In fact, they had to come forward to deny a Lassa fever case in an Abuja hospital, which was prominent on the social media.
It was said to have occurred somewhere. Yes. But Dr. Ihe Kweazu has issued a statement. But you keep hearing these reports about the incidents. This one now is talking about Ondo. And Kieran, you are right. That is a major, it's a public health.
It's a major, exactly, because it is spreading. If this is what anything to go by, it is quite spreading. And we need to bring Ihe Kweazu back on this platform, to actually talk about it. Because the thing is spreading and it kills fast. All right, so let's go to the Nigerian Pilot newspaper for this morning. And below the nameplate, we have don't laugh yet. PDP tells Governor Amakura and others. Governor Amakura is actually the governor of Nasarawa State. He's on page 9. And again, Libya repatriates 330 Nigerian migrants from Tripoli. Don't they finish? Did millions of Nigerians really move to Libya? Because we have trenches of people that are being brought back home, and it's not stopping. Okay, we'll get to that. But let's take the main headline on the Nigerian Pilot. INEC strategizes for March 9 elections with 3 riders as Commission meets 36 state recs. Says it's taking stock and reviewing last elections, assures that March 9 elections will be free, fair, and credible. Details can be found on page 8. And now the photograph there, they're showing President Muhammadu Buhari apparently celebrating his victory with some Nigerian women who must have participated actively in the election. Now, below that, we have PDP raises alarm over militarization of South-South. This is on page 12. Now, the foot of the Nigerian pilot, Akumed dead Benue people's mind and paid dearly for it. That's Otom, the governor of Benue State. Buhari likely to dissolve cabinet before May 29, says additional. It's on page 6. Now, Supreme Court decides on Ogan's case May 17. And court jails former Air Vice Marshal 21 years for money laundering. And then reliance on importation of military hardware regrettable, says the minister. It's on page 12. Let's return again to Bayo.
Yes, indeed, the presidency has enjoined its supporters not to control their jubilation and not to infuriate their opponents. In fact, the National Assembly liaison to the presidency, Senator Eta Inang, was one who provided this advice. And the All Progressive Congress says it looked forward to defending its victory of the presidential election in court. The chairman for the people, All Progressive Congress, Adams Oshiomhole, says no one should be denied the right to dispute an election in court. He recalls his own experience of mobilizing evidence when he believed he was cheated. However, he says, despite the All Progressive Congress overall victory, it still has complaints about rigging in some parts, and the grounds of such petition are being prepared to also go to court. The Secretary to the Government of the Federation has also remarked that any aggrieved one has a right to go to court. He said the Buhari administration is not bothered as the process was open and transparent. Do we have to look at the courts now? Yes, at the court, the Supreme Court is to decide on the suit by Cross River State, particularly on the suspended Chief Justice of Nigeria on May 17th. The Cross River State government had challenged the suspension and the trial of Justice Walter Onoge at the Code of Conduct Tribunal. The plaintiff is seeking that the Apex Court to set aside the 6-count charges of non-declaration of assets and the suspension and the trial of the suspended Chief Justice of Nigeria. The Solicitor General, who represented the federal government, raised preliminary objection. He asks that the court dismisses the suit as the Cross River State lacks the local standi for the suit. The federal government challenged the jurisdiction of the Apex Court. It also deposed that there is no dispute between the federal government and the Cross River State government as envisaged under Section 2321 of the 1999 Constitution, adding that the matter of the suit is personal to Justice Walter Onoge and does not affect Cross River State. The Plaintiff Counsel, however, countered that the suit is not about the suspension of the Chief Justice of Nigeria, but about the interpretation of the provisions of the 1999 Constitution, particularly sections 4, 5, 6, 1531, 158, and Part 1 of the 3rd Schedule, and the filing of charges against a judicial officer without recourse to National Judicial Council. May 17th is the date for that hearing.
All right, Daily Sun newspaper is next for us. Some of the other headlines that we read from the other papers are also on the front page. PDP, APC throw punches over Atiku. That's right there. Abdulsalami Peace Panel meets PDP presidential candidate is there. Lead story says, INEC, that's the kicker, we are ready for governorship and state assembly elections. And the writer, don't threaten voters, presidency tells APC members. You can see the first family in the photograph. There it says President Muhammadu Buhari and his wife Aisha and children as the president continues to celebrate his re-election. But I'm wondering, Kirian and Bayo, in the celebratory mood, they are showing only one set, that's 4. It should have been 2 now. That was the purpose of the campaign. 4 by 4.
Look at that of the president and the wife. It can be 4 by 4.
I know, each of them should be 4 by 4. They're showing only 4. So that's anyway. Right at the bottom of that, below the photograph, says Buhari aides speaks on new cabinet. and says appointment of ministers and advisors won't take long as in 2015. PDP alleges military occupation of South-South and court sacks Briggs as a court party governorship candidate in Rivers. Will implement 30,000 naira minimum wage. That's according to the Secretary of the Government of the Federation. It says Atiku can go to court. Details on page 12.
Yeah. Well, the special advisor to the president, Mr. Femi Adesina, has indicated that there's a likelihood of the dissolution of the federal cabinet, and he explained that the cabinet will be dissolved at the expiration of the first term by May 29. He says that the president will now say thank you, and then he will now discuss with them, and then when he is inaugurated for the second term, a new cabinet will be constituted and a personnel is appointed, and that is when the new cabinet will be formed. You recall that when the president came in, the cabinet could not be formed, particularly appointment of ministers, until November, between May 29th and November. And this was challenges about transition challenges and also a long-term briefing by a permanent secretary of the president, because the process of transition was quite stalled and there was not adequate information between the living government and the incoming administration. Yes.
And besides that, firstly, the government then, the APC government then, many Nigerians believe we're not certain about winning the election. So when they came on board, it became difficult to actually assemble the cabinet. But the president actually explained something that period, and he said that yes, indeed it was delayed. But when it comes to the ministry, if you know the structure of every ministry, you find out that the key operators of the ministries are the permanent secretary and directors of the various departments. These are the working structure of a ministry. Now, the minister is just a political head,
yes,
and all that. But of course, that's not to say that it's not good to, appoint cabinet members at the right time.
Indeed, the permanent secretaries are the accounting officers of the ministries.
Yes, that's fine. In terms of the longevity of the existing Federal Executive Council, that's to say the cabinet, they cannot be in office longer than May 28th. May 28th, so it should be taken for granted. And I mean, the president is not hoping, and there's no such hint, to dissolve his cabinet and then appoint new ones before May 29th. Because even if we were to dissolve his cabinet today and appoint new set of ministers who will have to be cleared by the Senate, by the way, they cannot be in office longer than May 28th. So it's the presumption of the exhaustion of tenure is quite obvious.
But if the new ones have to be cleared by the Senate, which of course has not convened or have not been inaugurated, so how would that go?
No, this is how it works. The president's first term ends on the 28th, if you like, to spills over to the 29th. But his cabinet and his appointees, including senior special assistants and special advisors, their tenure will elapse on the 28th of May. So, of course, the president normally would thank them.
Does he have the power to extend their tenure?
No. Your tenure will end on the 20th, including his own tenure as first term. He now takes the oath of office for a new term for 4 years on the 29th. And thereafter, he can begin a new round of appointments. Now, those appointments will, of course, be with the immediate personal aides, such as senior special assistants, but not special advisors yet. Because he has to send the number of special advisors to be appointed to the Senate. The Senate will approve the number, not the persons. And thereafter, he can begin to name them. But the Senate, of course, has a tenure up until about June 6th, sometime in June. That was when their first convocation took place. Yes.
All right, now let's go to the editorial. And editorial today is taken from the Daily Trust newspaper. It's on Cameroon. Don't throw refugees. Actually, I was going to really we're going to talk about this because it's becoming very halting to Nigeria, because of course the central theme of Nigeria's foreign policy is on Africa. Right. Now, in a move that lacks both humanitarian passion and good neighborliness, 40,000 residents of Kalabaje local government area of Borno State, who fled to Gora in Cameroon last month due to incessant Boko Haram attacks, were sent back home 2 days ago. Field Communication Officer of Medicines Sans Frontiers MSF in Maiduguri, Abdul Karim Yakubu, said on Wednesday that these Nigerian refugees are now leaving Cameroon after being told to go home.
Yes, very sad indeed, because not only have they been asked to go home, but they are leaving Gora in Cameroon and walking back on foot back into Nigeria. They had to become refugees in Cameroon when their ancestral home in Kalabalige local government area of Borno State was invaded by the insurgent Boko Haram, and they had to take refuge in Cameroon. Sadly, the editorial has described this as an act that is devoid of humanitarian consideration, and not only that, it's an act that doesn't speak well of good neighborliness. Nigeria, Cameroon all belong to the same West African sub-region. Cameroon sometimes even try to be part of the ECOWAS, and there is this tendency of free movement of citizens. But in the case of refugees, there is an internationally recognized criteria of humanitarian gesture of accommodating and providing for them. Where a nation is overwhelmed, the United Nations High Commission for Refugees always come to the aid of nations, particularly to provide succor for them. The alarm that has been raised by the Maison Sans Frontières director is that many of them, because the condition under which they lived in Cameroon was very poor, are suffering from infectious diseases, and therefore they are not even in the state of health to be able to traverse walking back to Nigeria. And so something has to be done very quickly. Immediately, I think the National Emergency Agency, NEMA, should be mobilized to provide transportation to try and see what they can do in evacuating them, rather than undergoing the ordeal of walking back all across from Gora back into Nigeria.
Right. Kiran, the irony is that there are also Cameroonian refugees in Cross River.
Exactly, and
yes.
one wonders whether we don't have an intergovernmental relationship, to discuss some of these things, and of course take care of those people who are already suffering. But trekking from Cameroon to Nigeria is a tedious task. And at this point, we conclude the newspaper review for today. I would like to appreciate Bayo Atoyebe's contribution to this segment. Bayo,
thank you very much.
Indeed, and we'll see you again on Monday. This is Good Morning Nigeria, broadcast live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. We'll take a break now. When we return, we'll go into the conversation for today. That's the lessons learned from just concluded 2019 presidential and National Assembly elections. Stay with us.
A new edition of TV Guide is out with special focus on the role of the media in election coverage. Exclusive on the National Broadcasting Commission, its mandate as the sole regulator of Nigerian media. Dr. Toba Daba then and Ishak Modibokau now. This edition also features the king of stand-up comedy in Nigeria, Ali Baba. NTA standards to be ready for election transmission after decades of abandonment. Find out from the DG transactional elections in our political space. An evil wind that blows no good. DG, National Orientation Agency Conference. TV Guide, your indispensable companion, x-rays the impact of social media on electioneering process as electorates present their expectations from incoming government. Meet some TV professionals behind the screen and other inspiring stories in sports, entertainment, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
So, how do I look, guys?
Aha! I see what's wrong.
What?
The wall doesn't match your elegance.
Then we must do something about it right away.
At Royal Ceramics, we offer you a wide range of beautiful wall and floor tiles designed specially to fit your lifestyle.
So, what do you guys think?
Thank goodness we changed to Royal Ceramic tiles.
I agree.
Like mother, like daughter.
Royal Ceramics, finish in style.
You are watching NTA, Nigerian Television Authority. For more information and news updates, visit our website at www.nta.ng, or you can follow us on Twitter at NTA News Now, or you can like us on Facebook at NTA Network News. Stay connected on our YouTube channel at www.youtube.com/NTA News Online. Watch our live stream at www.nta.ng/live. NTA, you can't beat the rich.
All right, you're welcome back, and it's still Good Morning Nigeria, reaching you live on the network service of the Nigerian Television Authority. And just before we begin our conversations on lessons learned from the presidential and National Assembly elections, let's take this background by way of a vox pop compiled by our correspondent, Victor Azu.
On the part of the electorate, more enlightenment is the key, because many Nigerians don't even know things that are involved in the electoral process.
Must we be in queue for us to vote? Must we be accredited before we vote? Why not, if I can use my ATM to withdraw in Newi, to withdraw in Obo, in Newi local government, why don't I use my ATM card to vote in my house, to vote in the voting unit near my place? Why not Nigeria adopt that?
The numbers of political parties we have this time around is overwhelming to INEC. Then printing the ballot box, you now see that the voting box there is more, because you are having almost 73 political parties. So these are what contribute to large, huge invalid vote.
If INEC really want to conduct a credible vote in Nigeria, they should start now the process of electronic voting.
I think the election in Nigeria, the INEC as a body is not the problem. The problem is our politicians from all parties. Everybody wants to win at all costs.
Let them concentrate on the methodology of voting in this country. By going for e-voting, you can stay in your house, cast your votes, and still go on your normal business. What is the need? Wasting people's time.
And joining us now in the studio to talk on the lessons learned after the conduct of the 2019 Presidential and National Assembly elections is Lai Mohammed, the Minister of Information and Culture. So thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you. Good morning, Nigerians.
Also here with us in the studio is Professor Osemen Osumbo. Kingsley is laughing because I didn't get it well. I'll learn. Former governor of Edo State and, of course, former distinguished senator of the Federal Republic. So you're welcome to Good Morning Nigeria.
Thank you very much. Good morning. All right, Kyrian, thanks. Is Professor Osereme Osumbo, yes, former governor of Edo State and two-term senator of the Federal Republic. He's also professor of law, by the way. We also have with us in the studios our familiar guest, Dr. Garba Abari. He's Director General of the National Orientation Agency. Dr. Abari, pleasure to have you with us today.
Good morning, Kingsley. Good morning, Nigeria.
And from our Kaduna Network Center, we have Awal Muhammad Marshi. Yes, Marshi is the INEC Administrative Secretary for Kaduna State. Madam Marshi, pleasure to have you with us on the program again.
Happy to be with you.
Curious, you have you observed, you know, it's all our guests, they are white.
I think some of our guests are in the celebration mood, but I'm sure our man in Kaduna there is not celebrating because there is an umpire.
Absolutely, absolutely. So that's why you have a touch of blue on his to distinguish what he has. Okay, so let's begin a conversation that we usually for an election that has come and gone. 3 elections that we had last Saturday: presidential election, Senate election, and House of Representatives election. 2 aspects: process and outcome. Let's begin with the Honorable Minister of Information. What's your take on what transpired on Saturday and beyond?
Well, I must say that the Saturday's election will probably go down in the history of the country as one of the fairest and most credible, given the attention to details, giving the adequate security provided throughout the country. Over the years, I've monitored elections, and troubles actually don't start really until after the voting, when thugs, hooligans, disrupt elections either by way of ballot box snatching or by way of violence. But even more importantly is that the introduction of the card reader has actually brought a lot of sanity into the voting system. You recall that before the introduction of the ballot of the card reader, fantastic figures used to be recorded, in our elections. And I remember, for instance, that in 1999, I think about 18.7 million votes were recorded. In 2003, I think it went about 22 million. In 2007, it went about 24.2 million. And then they came back to, in 2011, came back to 24.2 or 22.5, I'm not sure. Compare that now to the time we have card readers, where, the same PDP that scored these fantastic figures in 1999 to 2003 scored just about 11 million in the 2015 election. So I think the introduction of the card readers has actually contained a lot of the irregularities, and at the same time, I think the adequate security provided this time around made the elections almost violence-free. Of course, there were pockets of violence in some areas, but that cannot be compared to what used to happen before. So I believe that I join both local and international observers who have said that the elections were largely free and fair and credible, and that in particular that credit should go to the security agencies.
All right, thank you. We'll definitely return to you for further discussions on other issues and perspectives to this conversation. But let's go to Garba Barry, the Director General of the National Orientation Agency. But you had the onerous task of sensitizing Nigerians before this election. And we also know that your organization reached out to every nook and cranny of this country with respect to informing Nigerians on how to behave on an election day. But now, after this election, what is your own assessment of how the electorate, the umpire, and the security operatives operated on that day?
Thank you very much. I think that still boils down to the issue of the process. Now, I think we have done very well. The National Orientation Agency, the Independent National Electoral Commission have all done very well. The media, NTA in particular, have been our partners in this sensitization and advocacy. But there are lessons to learn. The first lesson to learn is the fact that in an attempt to expand the political space, and without prejudice to impinging on the fundamental rights of citizens to associate freely, the Independent National Electoral Commission went to the extent of registering up to 91 political parties. Now, one of the lessons that the National Orientation Agency has learned, and what Nigerians are also learning, is the fact that this is the first time you have a ballot paper nearly the size of a newspaper page. We undertook an advocacy and the sensitization on how to identify the political parties, both by name and by symbols. and I must confess, is a Herculean task. I have a personal experience. On the day I wanted to cast my vote, it took me almost 40 seconds before I could figure out which of the parties I wanted to vote for, before I could actually pick out. And that's me. So in an environment where you have such very massive and humongous level of voter illiteracy, it becomes a big challenge. And I think we need, as a people, begin to develop a conversation around whether, without prejudice to impinging on the rights of citizens to associate, we actually do need 91 political parties. It's not just that the parties are there, but because a lot of public funds will go in to the organization, the running, the management, the printing of these political parties on the ballot paper. Such massive public funds can be channeled elsewhere. I have just heard people talking about electronic voting. I have just heard about people talking about why they cannot just sit down at home. You know, but some of these resources that would have otherwise been spent in improving the process are actually now being misdirected, if as I would want to say, into printing of ballot papers with political parties who hardly can get more than 100, some even as little as less than 100 votes in a national election. This is one of the lessons. The second lesson is actually to do with the logistics. This is a country that is very expansive with so many challenges of reaching out. Now, after all the assurances given by the Independent National Electoral Commission as to its state of preparedness, 3 or 4 hours to the elections, it has had to call off the elections, citing logistical challenges. Now, these are lessons that we also need to learn. Must we, for example, have to import our ballot papers from print and bring our ballot papers from outside the country? Why? Now, this therefore brings us the issue of trust between the people and the political class. Because unless we are able to begin the process of re-establishing that trust that had always governed our politics. I remember when I was immediately out of the university in 1979, I was a polling officer. All I did was to go to the INEC office on the day of the election, collected the INEC back, and the ballot papers unaccompanied, and I went to my polling booth unaccompanied. That was 1979. So I think there are actually lessons to learn from the organization, the processes of in the 2019 elections, which we must begin to develop some conversations around and they begin to address. And then thirdly is also the attitude of the political class, something that we have seen manifesting itself as the preparations for the elections reached crescendo. The use of very intemperate language, lack of modesty in what is being said, now incitement, and of course deviation from addressing the issues, and instead of the issues we started addressing personalities, and this had now gotten us to what we are now seeing, a seeming division of the country into political blocks, and along, instead of being along partisan line, but among political blocks defined by ethnicities and religion, and this is very dangerous.
All right, Dr. Barry, thank you very much for your opening statement. Let's bring in now Professor Osumbo. Professor Osumbo, in terms of process and outcome, what are your thoughts on the February 23rd elections, presidential, Senate, and House of Reps?
Well, my first reaction would be to comment on the largely peaceful conduct of the elections. As the Honorable Minister said before, even though it was not perfect, there were a few incidences of violence and misconduct here and there. Nevertheless, on the whole, as adjudged both by Nigerian observers and international observers, the process was good and conformed with international best practice. And I think we need to commend ourselves for achieving that milestone. The other is that, just to remind Nigerians that about ending of November or December, when Mr. President declined or vetoed the electoral amendment bill, there was a lot of uproar, and people were insinuating that that might affect the process of the election and the outcome of the election. But Mr. President's main reason, first reason, which he gave, was that the amendment was coming too close to the general elections, and that you don't introduce new rules, as it were, in the middle of the game. We cannot see that he was right. And perhaps if we had introduced new rules when the game had already started, we probably would not have attained the level of success that we attained now. Which brings me to the usual saying, what many Nigerians talk about, is that our problem is in Nigeria is not absence of laws, but implementation of the laws. I remember I was on a discussion program in another channel, another television, when participants were saying that there was no legal framework for the conduct of the elections. So I disagreed, but we can now see that there was legal framework for the elections, and carrying out the various activities within the provisions of the existing legal framework, we were able to achieve the success that we did. That, however, is not to say that there is no room for improvement. And a lot of people have been talking about areas that the National Assembly would need to revisit in order to improve on the process in future by way of amendments to the electoral bill or act. One of them would be the place of technology. How do you deploy technology? People have been talking about card readers and so forth and so on, which have not been fully captured in the Electoral Act, the use of technology. So I hope that and Mr. President did say that after this election, the National Assembly still has time to revisit the Electoral Amendment Bill, bring it to him, correct the imperfections that he had observed, and he would be willing to assent to the bill. So the National Assembly has that opportunity now to correct those errors, those areas, and then introduce a new Electoral Act, which hopefully will be tested at various elections and by-elections before we deploy the Act in the general elections 4 years from now. And then on the issue of which Dr. Garba Abari mentioned about proliferation of political parties, let me remind Nigerians that the 2001 Electoral Act did attempt to introduce checks to avert this proliferation of parties. Incidentally, I happened to be the chairman of INEC committee in the Senate then. But people questioned it, that it was an attempt to narrow the space, political space for Nigerians, and that it was more or less an infringement on the freedom of association that Nigerians enjoyed under the Constitution. Chief Ganifa at that time was very passionate about this. He went to court, and up to the Supreme Court, his objections were upheld, and the Supreme Court expunged those aspects of the Electoral Act of 2001, which were designed to ensure that formation of political parties is not just for, every Dick and Harry, and you don't just wake up, form a political party which exists only in your handbag, in your portfolio. So maybe the time has come for us again, the National Assembly and of course the Houses of Assembly, because this will involve amendment of the Constitution, to revisit the Constitution and, if necessary, impose certain checks to ensure that we do not have this proliferation of parties and the attendant difficulties for our electoral process. What those checks will be can be debated in the process of amendment of the Constitution, but definitely, if we do not do something about it, perhaps 4 years from now, we'll be having 200 political parties, and that would be making a mockery of the entire process.
I think, actually, that's a very important point that he has raised, proliferation. You and I have hosted many presidential candidates here, and you discover that it became a child's play. We are talking about vying for the presidency, and you see some people who don't have, the required structure to really run for presidency. Now, coming up, okay, we'll visit that maybe in the course of discussion. But right now, let's go to Kaduna Network Center, where Awal Mohammed Mashi is, the INEC Admin Secretary, Kaduna State. The election was moved from 16th to 23rd of February. Perhaps because of the logistic problems that INEC told Nigerians. And on that day, the 23rd, the nation still recorded some imperfections in the way and manner INEC conducted the election in some areas. Now, what lessons, would you say INEC has learned from this outing on the 23rd, having in mind the fact that we also have another election coming on the 9th of March?
Very much. Good morning, Nigeria, once again. I think before I delve into answering the questions, the issues you've just raised, I'd like to go back to one of the issues that were just discussed. The gentleman from NOAA, doctor, whom I have a lot of respect for, talked about the proliferation of political parties, and it was also raised by Professor Osumbo, an equally erudite gentleman that I have a lot of respect for. But I'd like to emphasize that what we did was in line with extant laws. The provision says that political parties have to be registered if they attain some minimum requirements, and these associations have done what is supposed to be done to be registered as political parties, and we had to register them. So I want to say that unless and until the extant laws are amended, we will continue to see that. I think it was during the time of Jega, he attempted to reduce the political parties, but they went to court, and unfortunately for us, we were deemed to be doing the wrong thing, and so they had to be brought back. So I think in that respect, we did the right thing, we did the needful. Now, in respect of the lessons learned, we had our issues definitely in Kaduna, and I believe all over the Federation. But the bottom line is that we had an election, we had losers and we had winners. So basically, we did the needful. We had issues, like I said, bordering on logistics, for instance, staff, ad hoc staff not reaching the voting places early enough. We had issues with our smart card readers here and there, but basically we had a result, and the encomiums being showered on us are a testimony to the fact that we did the needful. But I must confess once again that we had issues, and as I'm talking to you now, we are looking into those issues, and by the time the next set of elections come on the 9th of March, we are going to see a different conduct of the election. That I can promise the Federation.
All right, Madam Awal Mashi, thank you very much. Maybe now that we're still talking about the number of political parties, I should like to invite our attention to part of the fourth alteration to the 1999 Constitution, which was signed by President Muhammadu Buhari. The power of INEC to deregister political parties. Political parties have to meet certain requirements. For instance, if you take the 3 sets of elections that we just had for the presidential, a political party that does not win 25% of the votes in any one state is already destined for deregistration. Or a political party that fails to win a seat in the National Assembly, Senate or House of Reps, could also be destined for the registration. Or a political party that doesn't win a councillorship election, even though that is a bit awkward because councillorship elections are usually conducted by state independent electoral commissions. Or a political party that fails, to win a seat in a state House of Assembly. The question is, at what time will INEC kick all of this into effect? Is it at the end of this cycle of general elections? Because we have some off-cycle elections, so that the numbers that we are complaining about now, 91 of them, when will INEC begin to take account of all of these provisions and they see what they do? Let's go back again to Marshe in Kaduna. Question. We have an audio challenge. Maybe I bring the question back, to our guests in the studios. Alhaji Lai Mohammed, I see you eager to respond to this. I mean, the number of political parties and how, without, as Dr. Abari also indicated, as well as Professor Osumbo, seeking to, if you like, compromise the associational rights also guaranteed in the fourth chapter of the Constitution.
If I understand your question very well, and also your premise, you seem to say that even though the Constitution or the electoral law is so that anybody that meets the basic requirement of party registration can register, and become a political party. But however, there's also a provision in the law that gives powers to INEC to deregister any political party that fails to meet certain conditions.
That's right.
Such as failure to score 25% of all the votes cast, or failure to produce a member of National Assembly, or failure to produce a member of the State House of Assembly. If that is the law,
and that is it, yeah.
And then I think that INEC owes the nation a duty to implement that law. And that means, in effect, that without really impinging on anybody's fundamental rights of association, we can actually prune the number of political parties in the country.
All right, thank you.
I think we should try and return to Kaduna. Okay, it's not clear yet. Okay, it's not clear yet. Okay, let's turn to Professor Osumbo on this issue of a proliferation, which you actually raised in your first comment.
Yes, it's gladdening to note that there are enabling provisions in the Constitution now by way of recent amendment empowering INEC to deregister political parties that are not really living up to standard. But this is something which they had done before, but it was invalidated by reason of the fact that there was no legal or constitutional basis for it. So that would be a welcome approach towards bringing sanity or pruning down the number of political parties. But mind you, Nigerians are very ingenious. I'm not sure that there is a mechanism in the current amendment which will prevent the person whose political party has been deregistered from waking up tomorrow, going back to INEC and registering another political party with a different name. So while this is welcome development, we must also revisit the constitutional requirements for the formation, not deregistration, formation of political parties. Otherwise, if you deregister, then they will easily register again. Some of the provisions that were contained in the Electoral Act of 2001 I mentioned, which were declared unconstitutional, included the fact that political parties should have presence in at least 2/3 of the states of the Federation. They should have offices. They should have national officers. So if you have that spread, then you avoid a situation where somebody, only himself is the political party. Himself, maybe even members of his family may belong to other political, but he just keeps the certificate of registration in his briefcase and he's a party. And he claims a right to be present when where political parties, any forum at which they are meeting. He exercises his right to address Nigerians as a political party and so many of the other logistics difficulties that have been spoken about. So while the current amendment is welcome, we still need to revisit the provisions with respect to requirements for the registration of political parties.
Okay, well, Professor Subo, thank you very much. There's an issue. We're talking about spread now, and I've had cause to raise this since we've been all of this week engaged in the postmortem of the Presidential and National Assembly elections. My question is going to Alhaji Lai Mohammed, Information Minister. This is the first time that President Muhammadu Buhari, as a candidate in a presidential election, is scoring with the spread that we have seen him score. 34 states in which he had minimum requirement, which is to say 25% of the votes in all the zones of the country. We saw him in 2003, 2007, 2011, and of course the first time, even in 2015, his performance didn't appear to have been as spectacular as it has been now in 2019. What, in your opinion, were the facilitative factors that guaranteed the president the kind of score that he has attained?
Thank you. I think in 2003, 2007, 2015, Mr. President was just a presidential candidate. But in 2019, Mr. President was not just a candidate, he was a president seeking for re-election. And as a president seeking for re-election, he actually campaigned on his achievements. Fortunately, these achievements were achievements that spread across the entire country. You see, when a president campaigns on his achievement in the area of, say, security, for instance, then it's not just limited to, say, the Northeast. It's actually extended to the whole country. But when you look into the spectacular areas of achievement of Mr. President, especially in the area of social investment program, where today the president's, the administration feeds 9,300,000, pupils, 1 meal a day, every school day. And this program touches at least 28 states. One will not be surprised if Mr. President scores, at least 25% in any of those states. Two, when you look at what has happened to the agriculture in particular, where today we have a rice revolution, and this rice revolution actually covers 34 states. It's not limited to any part of the country. Or if you take the issue of, say the economy, or infrastructure, as I speak today, there's no one single state of the Federation where one construction or other is not going on. Take Nigeria and go to any of the geopolitical zones or any of the states where either one project going on, we're either constructing roads or we're constructing bridges. Or if you look at even the economy, we inherited a recession-bound economy, and today we are back scoreless. As a matter of fact, our fourth quarter results, one of the best since we came in. So this, to me, explains why Mr. President got acceptance in more than 34 states of the Federation. I think it's because the people who voted for him actually saw the evidence of his achievement. It has impacted. These achievements have impacted on their lives. So this, to me, explains easily why Mr. President was able to have, 25% in about 34 states.
Honorable Minister, let's stay with you because you will agree that the election, especially the presidential election, was keenly contested. It was the fight of two giants. And of course, we can't conclude this discussion, this aspect of the discussion, without talking about the gains made by the main opposition party, the PDP. And the party also had spread. In fact, won in some APC states. That's a giant stride, as far as that election was concerned. Now, what would you believe that gave such advantage also to the opposing party, which also did well in the election, as much as the party did not win?
Okay, before I go to that, give me an opportunity to speak. I think I just want to add one or two things to Kingsley's, first question. Certain issues that cut across the country that affected the performance of the president has to do with certain decisions he took, especially in respect of paying the pension and gratuities of some organizations. You can imagine Mr. President actually resolved the issue of police officers who served under the defunct Biafra. He was the only president that was able to resolve the issue of the, liquidated staff of Nigerian Airways. He was also able to take on and resolve the issue of pension of the Alaja Steel, company. So these are some of the issues that actually cut across every state. I just wanted to add that. Now, to come back to your question, you see, traditionally, politically, any government is a sitting duck, and it's always the pasture is always greener from the side. Now, when you look at the kind of challenges Mr. President took on, he came into office at a time where our infrastructures was actually almost zero, where we were reeling under debts, where the oil prices had collapsed, where insecurity was, rife. And he had to, within a short period of 4 years, was expected to fix all this. Now, it was very easy for people to campaign and say, oh, we don't have roads, we don't have power, we don't have this, forgetting that this president, this administration, is trying to redress the failures of cumulative 60 years of governance. So it's always easy for the opposition to criticize, but the important thing, and I think this is that Mr. President actually won. The opposition might have done fairly well in some states, which are even probably APC states. But when you look at the margin of victory of Mr. President, it was even bigger than the one he had in 2015. Two, it's also important to understand that at the end of the day, all politics is local. So there might be some local factors in certain states that will be responsible for Mr. President not to have done very well in those states. Now, issues vary from state to state, and there are also some very strong personalities in some states. But overall, my joy is that Mr. President did not only score the highest number of votes, he met the requirement, and he even had a bigger margin than what everybody expected. What we were told was going to be a very tight race, it's going to be very close. There was nothing tight or close about it. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you very much, Elijah Lai Mohammed. Let's bring in again Dr. Garba Abari. Dr. Abari, from your perspective as, the czar, if you like, of national orientation, what does the president's victory signify in terms of, one, having to galvanize the entire country because he's been re-elected as president of the Federal Republic?
Thank you very much. I think this is also part of the lessons that we are supposed to learn from the 2019 general elections. First, when you compare the elections in 2015 with what we had today, in 2015, the APC came into office on promises. On promises. In 2019, they went to the electorate with a scorecard. And this scorecard, as people, or as some of the people I have listened to have said, became like a referendum point of whether Nigerians have come to terms or have come to accept that these scorecards are real. In 34 states of the country, the president had met all the constitutional requirements. That places him as the president of, therefore, the whole country. And as he has consistently been saying, that he is not only a politician, he was also a military head of state and a military officer who fought for the unity of this country. Now, an opportunity has now been given to him more than ever before for him to actually bring out that expectation. And I believe from the statements coming from him after the elections, even before the elections, Mr. President is on the way to reunify the country. Of course, our elections always have a way of developing divisive tendencies. But you see, over time, immediately after the elections, tempers begin to cool down, the atmosphere begins to get calmer, and things get back to normal. I have a sense that the referendum, or the very wide margin which Nigerians had made it possible for Mr. President to gain in this election, also places on him a moral burden and a leadership responsibility, and of course a political responsibility to reintegrate the country and bring back everybody on course, because it's a mandate from Nigerians. A mandate he had now gotten much more than he had gotten in 2015 when he came in as the president of the in the first instance. That's one. Now the second issue is also for politicians who are major players to also wear the patriotic curbs and put petty partisan interests aside and put the larger interests of the country, because elections are only a 4-year cycle. The country is a perpetuity. It will continue to exist ad infinitum, and therefore must necessarily transcend petty partisan interests of individuals and of political parties and of politicians. Now, to this extent, therefore, government has the responsibility, the president has the responsibility, those who also wanted to become president of the country owe it a moral duty to ensure that from actions and from speeches and from body languages and from all manner of nuances, do things that will not inflame passion, but keep the country on the forefront of their discourse and their considerations. And I think this is one of the things that the elections of 2019 had now played out. And now finally, followers themselves have a role. Followers themselves have a role. And what role? The role is, we all have contested, very hotly contested. Kingsley had even said that the president was able to win, opposition was able to win, even in states that are controlled by Mr. President's party. It speaks about the propriety of the elections, its level of fairness, and the degree of credibility that had accompanied the elections in many of these areas where opposition made significant inroad into the home base of the ruling party. So followers, leaders, all have now a responsibility to come together, clink the glasses, pat each other on the back, put our country in the on the forefront of our priorities, and begin to move on.
All right, thank you, Garba Abari. Election is not the beginning and end of a nation. After election, the nation continues to live. That's the message. And one aspect that you raised is that the elections of 2015, the president's campaign was based on promises, and this time around it was on scorecard. Yes. And that has aided him, to gain the spread that we were talking about. Now to Professor Osumbo, who is from the south part of Nigeria. Let's get to your own thought.
Although your heart is pretending.
We should change. We should swap.
I am promoting your culture. We're happy about that. So what does this spread mean to you?
Well, the Honorable Minister spoke about performance, that Mr. President has done very well, this administration has done very well in very many areas, including provision of infrastructure, which people can see and feel directly for themselves. However, a very strong factor which has not been mentioned, and I think has to be recognized, is the fact that in previous elections there were certain prejudices, certain characterizations that were associated with the personality of Mr. President. But people have now come to see that those characterizations may not necessarily be true, indeed are not true. I will say with all due sense of responsibility that in previous elections, particularly the 2015 elections, there was this campaign everywhere that if you vote Mr. President Muhammadu Buhari, then the candidate into office, he would Islamize Nigeria. Certain elements within the Christian community, particularly in the South and South-South, carried out that campaign with a lot of vigor. But the people have now seen Mr. President in the past 4 years has not Islamized Nigeria. So those who bought into that campaign in 2015 have realized that it was a ruse and not true. If Mr. President has not Islamized Nigeria in 4 years, then if you give him another 4 years, there's no indication that he will Islamize Nigeria. So they were willing to come out to give him their votes. There were also references to what happened when he was a military head of state. But Mr. President himself has said, well, that was then. He was wearing his uniform. Now he's a civilian, and he has to conduct his governance by way of respect to the provisions of the Constitution and the laws. So again, people have seen that some of those prejudices that people had before are not true, are not correct. So in areas where Mr. President did badly in elections in the past, this time around, those prejudices have been laid to rest and did not affect him. Rather, people were now looking at his performance and what he has been able to achieve. Let me, the other aspect of the question which you posed about the future, what happens, how does the Nigerian electorate, the Nigerian people, how do they benefit more from this new dispensation? I would say that while in 2015, as the government was coming in, Nigeria was sliding into economic recession. And that was a serious challenge, posed a very serious challenge to the new incoming administration in 2015. But that challenge is not there anymore. Happily, Nigeria has come out of recession, and a lot of things are being put on the path of progress. So I believe that now that Mr. President has been given a new mandate, a renewed mandate, that we will even do more. Particularly in the areas, the three key areas that he has always spoken about. The economy, security, and anti-corruption. So as I said, people are already beginning to see the benefits of economic gains, economic improvements. Many people identified with him and support him because of the anti-corruption. You know, because for me, the economy, whatever you do, whether it's economy or whatever areas of government, you will never get it right until we tackle corruption in this country. Some people say, oh, let him forget about corruption and face economy. But my reading is that that will just be like pouring water inside a basket. Because no matter how much you do to improve the economy, if there's rampant corruption, then you just be pouring water inside a leaking basket. But once you tackle corruption, then we'll be able to get the benefit of whatever efforts that government is making. So I want and do hope that Mr. President will sustain his anti-corruption struggle, and importantly, that the judiciary will give the necessary support to ensure that those cases that come before the courts are treated with the seriousness that they deserve. The Administration of Criminal Justice Act is now in operation. That has eliminated some of the gimmicks that defense counsels play in order to slow down the process. Those are out of the way, but we also need the judges to apply the spirit and letter of the Administration of Criminal Justice Bill in order to complement Mr. President's effort in fighting corruption.
All right, Professor Zumbo, thank you very much. And gentlemen, we're taking a short break now. When we return, we have reactions that have come in by way of tweets. We'll take those tweets, and hopefully we're able to reestablish our connection to our Cardinal Network Center.
A new edition of TV Guide is out with special focus on the role of the media in election college. Exclusive on the National Broadcasting Commission, its mandate as the sole regulator of Nigerian media. Dr. Toba Daba then and Ishat Modibo Kawu now. This edition also features the king of stand-up comedy in Nigeria, Ali Baba. NTA standards to be ready for election transmission after decades of abandonment. Find out from the DG transactional elections in our political space. An evil wind that blows no good. DG, National Orientation Agency Conference. TV Guide, your indispensable companion, x-rays the impact of social media on electioneering process as electorates present their expectations from incoming government. Meet some TV professionals behind the screen and other inspiring stories in sports, entertainment, and lots more. Grab a copy at the vendor near you or NTA stations nationwide. TV Guide, your indispensable companion.
All right, welcome back. And it's still Good Morning Nigeria. We're having our conversation segment on the lessons learned from the presidential and national assembly elections. Let's quickly go through some of the tweets that we have. First, Akinboyewa, another lesson to learn from the election is that it's important for politicians to be open and transparent. Politicians should learn to have cost proposals and discuss issues instead of using slogans and soundbites on social media. Election is not won on social media, period. Right.
All right, now from Dele Jack Solomon, he said, though there are reported cases of electronic voter verification devices failing in the presidential and national assembly elections, many believe the use of technology has helped to understand the electorate and their true behavior at the polls, as well as curb voter fraud. Nothing more, nothing less.
Francis Jethro, it says the election was hitch-free, but INEC needs to do better in the next round of elections. I suggest we use our BVN to authenticate our PVCs just like banks do. We must not be extravagant in whatever we do. It will help reduce costs for INEC.
Now, the election was generally, that's coming from Mohammed Abdul Karim, the election was generally free and fair with few bottlenecks, but there's always a room for improvement on the part of all the stakeholders, especially INEC.
This is coming from a Twitter handle, Kill My Nation. The outcome of the presidential elections has shown that Nigerians are wiser than before, and this should trigger the men at the helm of affairs to do the right thing and make Nigeria great.
All right, from Mike Anyako, he says, Many lessons were learned in the last presidential and National Assembly elections. They include the good, the bad, and the ugly. However, the good aspects greatly outweighed the other ones by mere fact that Nigerians came out to vote and winners emerged. The other bad aspects include needless violence and deaths.
All right, Husseini Ahmed has this tweet that even though the elections were relatively free, fair and credible, there was lack of competence on the part of some INEC ad hoc staff. INEC should therefore, where possible, conduct a refresher training for its ad hoc staff, particularly presiding officers and their assistants.
All right, First Sakimbe, we should not judge leaders until we've seen them stress-tested in the fury of election campaign. Many thought that President Buhari will not be able to campaign, but he campaigned in all 36 states and FCT, while his main opponent campaigned only in 19 states. No wonder he won.
Abdul, now INEC should learn fast. The issues arising from logistics shouldn't pose a challenge in future preparations for elections. Now, postponement of elections also tends to discourage voters from exercising their civic rights, hence the low turnout.
Now, Law Alpha C, the major lesson arising from the presidential election in particular is that Nigerians have become more politically aware.
Let's go over to Omen, that's the Twitter handle. I commend INEC for the success of the last elections and suggest that card readers should be fully charged before the election, and in subsequent ones the thumbprint should be matched correctly to avert irregularities.
Let's also go to Mohammed Mustafa. We have had one from Jack Solomon, so we'll go to Mohammed Mustafa. The international and local observers scored INEC good, I think about 80% or thereabout, despite some crises in some states, but we have to start planning with regards to overcome those challenges as soon as possible.
And Osman Banikanto tweets, now as stated by Dr. Abare, the pruning of 91 political parties to a realistic number is necessary, as this, of course, what we had now brought about delays in compiling and releasing results. However, the 23rd February elections were free and fair in my state, and that's Gombe.
All right, now we'll take from Farouk Nanon Bello. Frankly, I don't see the need for high number of political parties that are not consequential. We are not unaware of the fact that the majority of them are concerned with campaign funds they receive. Well, INEC should please invoke legal means. Well, INEC doesn't give campaign funds anymore.
No, it doesn't.
Right. And of course, we have heard from...
Yeah, we have. But just one point. I think this one is interesting, and then we take the others at a later time. First, Akimoya says the low budget national campaign we saw in this presidential election compared to previous campaigns should teach us that we have underestimated the dynamism of our electoral process. Now, from the experience of the APC campaign, we now know that doorstep, that's door-to-door campaign, can actually work.
All right. And not money. All right, yeah. We need to go back to Kaduna, where we have Awal Mohammed Mashi, the INEC Admin Secretary, Kaduna State. Well, we're not going to ask you questions about the president's spread,
that's right,
because you're an umpire. but so what interesting thing I want to premise I want to put across now. Talking about lessons learned from elections, we recall the 2007 election that brought in the late Yar'Adua to power. Yar'Adua acknowledged that there are encumbrances in that election and actually instituted a commission of inquiry to look into that and, of course, profile solutions to that. Now, we had the 2015 election, and this time we're talking about 2019 general elections. Well, if lessons were learned from previous elections, why is it that there is a reoccurrence of similar issues that are supposed to have been tackled after the previous elections? Now, some of the respondents through Twitter this morning harped on INEC. This election is not over until we have that of 9th of March. What are the assurances this time around? Because previously you have assured Nigerians, and of course the issue of logistics came up. This time around, what are we expecting come 9th?
Now, First, I think I should respond to one of the things you alluded to. You said, why are we having recurrences of things that previously existed? I think we have to look at what you are talking about. We have to be very, very specific. I want to believe that one of the things that we've had changed in recent elections is massive thumbprinting of ballot papers without any recourse to justice. I mean, even if you do go back to court, there is nothing that could be done about it, or previously very little was done about it. But with the introduction, like you said, of the smart card reader, I think we've checked that, because anybody who tries to misbehave, I mean, misbehave in the sense that you go and thumbprint, then the opposition, if they go to court, then definitely will have a reversal of whatever the result is. Now, coming back to our reassurances, like I said, I am not a buff for, encomiums. I appreciate when we are appreciated, but the kind of encomiums we are receiving, I don't think is good for us as a commission, nor is it good for the conduct of elections. I would have loved to be badged left, right, and center. That would have made me to sit more upright to do better. But all the same, I would like to assure the nation that, like I said earlier, we've realized our shortcomings, we've seen what we did wrong, we had issues with some of the smart card readers, but like I said in an earlier interview, we have what we call RATECs, registration area technicians, and we have trained them more and more on what to do when we have issues with smart card readers. So I want to believe that we are very, very good. And then in terms of personnel, the other personnel going late to the polling centers, this too has been addressed. We've realized one or two things that were not properly done, and I'd like to assure you that come 9th March, we are going to see a completely different conduct in our activities. So rest assured that we are going to do better come the governorship and state assembly elections.
All right, Awal Mashib, thank you very much. In Kaduna, during the presidential and national assembly elections, what was the nature of the void votes that were recorded? Because countrywide, we had some 1 million or more votes that were ultimately rejected. What was the nature of the void votes?
Well, I cannot give you figures, but definitely it was a little bit on the high side. And as a matter of fact, when I saw it, I was myself a little bit worried, because it shouldn't be like that. Votes shouldn't be voided. But all the same, like the gentleman, Dr. Abari said, we have been doing the very best that we can in conjunction with NOAA and other similar bodies to make people realize that this is how they should vote. But unfortunately, it seems clearly that we need to do more. Like I said, it was a little bit on the high side, and it is unacceptable. However, we are going to ensure that henceforth we do more toward enlightening people on how to do better. But I think the time is too short, I must confess, for us to do that before the 9th March state governorship and state assembly elections. But it is my hope that in subsequent elections we are going to see better conduct of elections with a view to ensuring that we have a lower rate of voided votes.
Kira, one other point. Well, I was actually asking about the nature, not the number of void votes in Kaduna. The nature, I mean, is it that the ballot papers were smudged or otherwise? Because I mean, we had a demonstration here on the eve of the elections where we're told that, you had to fold and then, you straighten or you flatten and then you dump. So perhaps that will be part of your postmortem. But there was another worrisome phenomenon that arose in the course of the elections. Namely, the attack of collation centers by some persons. How safe are collation centers, and how can we ensure that unauthorized persons do not have access to collation centers where there are allegations of manipulation?
By law, collation centers are supposed to be very, very safe, and because the security agents that operate at the PUs are supposed to converge at the collation centers. So realistically, they should be safe. And I don't know what really happened in other places, but here in Kaduna, we were relatively safe. And I don't think it was a problem for us. However, where it did happen, I think we should ask the security agents why it did happen. Because INEC is only concerned with the conduct of election and not the provision of security, even though I must confess that there is what we call the Interagency Consultative Committee on Election Security, of which INEC is part of. And I know that we've been doing a yeoman's job right from the period before the election. We've been sitting, we've been mapping out strategies on how to ensure that there is safety at every stage of the election. I think probably that is why we have a very low, occurrence of such things at the collation centers here in Kaduna. In other places, I cannot talk about because I wasn't there.
Obviously, this issue of security at the collation centers has actually been raised by even the opposition, who were talking about demilitarization of elections in Nigeria. But how do we now ensure that collation centers are safe on election day if we don't have armed policemen or military there? Because our election, the stage we are as a nation developmentally, can not really guarantee such safety, if election can ever be free and fair in this country. That's what many stakeholders are also saying. Now, this borders also on discipline. It borders also on lack of integrity. We have to go over to Barry once again, who is in charge of National Orientation Agency. We recall vividly that way back in time, when the president was a military administrator, we had war against indiscipline. And by 2015, when he was accosted with that, he now said, look, I am now a civilian. But what I'm asking is there no way a civilian administration can instill discipline in the society? What I mean here is this: Nigerians are known to do things just the way they like. Nobody obeys common traffic light. Election day, don't carry ballot papers or ballot boxes. That is what we saw in some parts of the country, even when the president has warned that people will be doing that at a very high risk. Now, what would be the role of National Orientation Agency in this dispensation with respect to bringing back discipline in our society?
Thank you very much. Let me first and foremost start by saying that election security does not only stop at deployment of military personnel. It does not stop at that. Actually, it should go and it should transcend beyond deployment of military personnel. That's one. I think I get the example in one of the sessions I have had here in the entry. In Ikiti, for example, when we had the gubernatorial elections, the police deployed nearly 30,000 policemen to police only Ikiti State gubernatorial elections. In Oshun, there was a deployment of nearly 18,000 policemen. We are now talking about a national election where the security agencies and all other security stakeholders in this matter had to be brought together, but yet we were spread thin because of the large number of polling units, polling stations, collation centers that had to be policed. Now, I think basically the attack that we have had on collation centers have to do, one, with the level of desperation on the part of the political players. The level of desperation was so high, such that people can go to the extent of recruiting thugs and put them on drugs and give them all manner of unwholesome weapons and small weapons to go and attack otherwise places that should have been sanctified and secured. That's one. Two is also the general price that we are paying in the collapse of our values. The general price we are paying as a country in the collapse of our values. The values of hard work, the values of integrity, and now the emerging very worrisome the development of widespread abuse of drugs among our younger people. A country like Nigeria, depending on which of the statistics you would want to use, has a population of over 70% of the of it comprising of young men, you know, below the age of 30 or 35. Now, therefore, this country makes it, this figure makes the country a country of extremely young people, and most of these things that you see are being hatched by adults and perpetrated by the younger people. Now, the issue of bringing in back discipline in the society, therefore, has to be seen in a multi-layered form. First, the role of the family. Second, the role of our education system. And then thirdly, the role of governance in trying to inculcate that, so that people, young people, will now come to appreciate that it does not pay to cut corners, that hard work pays, and that government at all levels are seen to have risen up to their occasion, and they provide good governance which will move up all this massive number of people that you see on the street that are susceptible to being taken over by desperate politicians for them to be unleashed on the larger population. And I think this is something which all of us must have to also expand the frontiers of conversation on, and they begin to do this. You are asking me whether a civilian administration can instill discipline. Of course, government at every level should inculcate discipline, because it is a moral responsibility.
Those days it was by force, but now we can't use force anymore.
The role of family, the role of religious leaders.
We're getting signals already that we should be wrapping up this conversation. I have two different questions, actually, one for the minister, the other for Senator Osumbo. So, and I'm sure, Kira, you also have your own set of questions. Honorable Minister, what has been your, if I may ask, interim evaluation of the role of the social media in the elections that we've just had? And then going forward, what lessons should we learn from that?
Well, I think if we went by the social media, the results declared by INEC would not have been would not be the reality. I think for too long, the social media has played a role which I will call overheating the polity. You see, social media, as good as it is, you know, for development, as good technology is good, social media in Nigeria in particular, I think, had been hijacked by a group of people with clearly different interests, you know, as opposed to the national interest. I think this again brings us to how do you actually, regulate the social media. You remember that as far back as 2018, we launched a national campaign against fake news. And even there we said, we're not going to go for legislation, but rather we would like to persuade people that social media, that fake news, it's injurious to development. You see, the one thing that I found extremely hurtful about the social media, that social media never for once threw a searchlight on the performance of government. And in that way, I think they failed to give a balanced picture of what the polity really was. That if Mr. President won this election is largely due to the fact that the social media failed, because the people whose lives were impacted by the achievements of the administration were the ones that voted for Mr. President. And it's very, very important, because when you look at what this president has achieved with much lesser resources, it's astonishing. You know, I spoke just, briefly about the issue of, social investment program, but let's look into infrastructure, for instance.
Yeah, Honorable Minister, we're getting pressed for time.
Right.
But you already talked about it, but I mean, you remember the joke, Kirian, one of our guests did say, and it's been repeated several times, that there are no polling units on WhatsApp. But let me bring in Professor Osumbo. Professor Osumbo, well, incidentally, we will focus on the presidential election, but the National Assembly Assembly election has also thrown up a number of surprises in terms of outcomes. And we know how critical, of course, that's the first arm of government at that level. Were you surprised by the outcomes that we have seen with regard to the National Assembly elections, particularly the Senate? You are a two-time senator, back-to-back. Is it so difficult to win re-election or to be tossed out, by your constituents at some point, as we have seen?
Well, thank you, Kingsley. Incidentally, I was just discussing this with the Honorable Minister before we came in here. And what I noted is that there has been a very high turnover rate at the National Assembly. Right from 2003, at every successive election, you find that not up to 1/3 are able to return in both chambers. And that has serious implications. You find that each new National Assembly has a preponderance, a majority of newcomers. So you start with orientation program, trying to put them through, and maybe within the first 2 years, some members may not even know how to move a motion. They wouldn't know the difference between a bill and a motion, and those kind of things which are not really good for our democracy and the progress, the development of our country. But there are factors that are responsible for that. Again, we discussed. One is that this is our turn kind of syndrome. Communities feel, constituencies feel it's our turn. And again, because people see political elective office as opportunity for advancement for themselves and their communities. But when this development is spread around the country, when the economic prosperity of people is a bit better than what it is now, then it is our turn syndrome will begin to disappear, and then you find people, communities being ready to elect and re-elect their members successively.
But there could also be the auto phenomenon that is familiar.
Let me just say before, I don't know if I will have another opportunity, is that, yes, what is very important is good name. My last word is that a good name is better than riches. So in spite of the temptations, people must strive to maintain good names, because that is what has given it to Mr. President.
All right, sir. Thank you very much indeed. The Otoge worked in Kwara, and of course the result is very clear, but we don't have time for the minister to elaborate on that for now. And so at this point, we'd like to appreciate all our guests this morning for making this program a success. And Lai Mohammed is the Minister of Information and Culture. Thank you, sir, and of course, congratulations.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, and Osereme Osumbo, Professor Osereme Osumbo.
That's better now.
Former Governor of Edo State and former distinguished senator, we thank you so much for your contributions.
My pleasure.
All right, now Garba Abari, Director General of the National Orientation Agency. It's been nice hearing from you this morning from the orientation perspective.
Thank you very much.
Thank you indeed. And from our Kaduna Network Center, a man that is always frank, Awal Mohammed Mashi, INEC Admin Secretary, Kaduna State. Thank you very much indeed for your frankly contribution this morning on Good Morning Nigeria.
All right, Kyrian, that's the note on which we shall end today's program, and indeed for the week. We thank you for tuning in. We are back on Monday, same time, 7 o'clock in the morning. Until then, have a nice day and enjoy the rest of your weekend. My name is Kingsley Osadolo.
I am Kyrian. Have a great weekend.